So these must be some pretty interesting times if your name is Jim Jefferies, because if you've been following this saga on YouTube or Reddit, you already know that he's been exposed by another YouTuber, Avi Yemini, whose hidden camera showed Jim Jefferies editing his interview and basically took his answers and edited them later on to essentially deceive viewers of what the interview was going to look like.
I might sound like a hippie saying this. What gives anyone the right to tell anyone where they can and can't live?
When you import this culture, what do you think is going to happen? Australia's going to end up the same shithole that they came from, that they were escaping.
What gives anyone the right to tell anyone where they can and can't live? Really?
Borders?
I know borders, yeah. But wouldn't it just be nice if...
But his latest appearance on Conan seems to have failed to stem the bleeding, because right now I see Jim Jefferies as a captain of a sinking ship that is built by Comedy Central. And all of this kind of reminds me of what Hannibal Buress did for Bill Cosby's career. But I mean, Jim Jefferies didn't rape or drug anyone, right?
Well, I
whatever gets us to 10.
I plied her full of drugs. I fucked her at the Edinburgh Festival when she was performing in a play with her grandfather. Back then she was 17 years old. I didn't know. I met her in a bar, but it's also, may I add, that that's legal in the UK. That's age of consent, so I didn't do anything wrong. I did ply her full of ecstasy, so I'm no fucking, but not like in drug, but we were taking ecstasy all night.
But I guess the question I want to tackle is, why is Jim Jefferies still popular, or at least seemingly popular in the public image? Because the viewers on Conan didn't seem to mind or didn't even know anything that he did. And the more I thought about this question, I also couldn't help but think of the late great comedian Patrice O'Neal, and in particular his views on owing those in Hollywood for putting you there in the first place, and importantly for keeping you there in the limelight no matter what. Because just as Patrice O'Neal hints at, I feel that Jim Jefferies has now got to a point where he owes his successful career to Comedy Central for at least putting him on his very own show, but importantly have also kept him there despite all this public outrage.
Okay, say I get a show on TV. Say it's not too popular. Mm-hmm. But they keep it on for me until it gets popular.
Well, favor.
I fucking owe something.
To give another example of what I mean, in that same hour, Patrice O'Neal also goes on to talk about the longevity of Will Smith's career, who over 15 to 20 years has seemingly overcome so many hurdles and remained a popular figure in the public's eye.
You think that's it, or
Dude,
or just people?
Will Smith has been famous
forever.
For 15 years.
Probably longer.
15 years.
Fresh Prince is pushing 20 years ago.
He does what he's supposed to do. And I'm not saying whatever. I'm just saying you just don't do 7 pounds.
I'll
Patrice, stay on top.
Let me play the other.
As Patrice O'Neal says, Will Smith does what he's supposed to do. And in almost like a Simpsons predicted at first like fashion, I was watching Will Smith's video of how he was nearly cast for the role of Neo in The Matrix, and was pleasantly surprised to see this side story of how he was reluctant to do the Men in Black franchise.
I had done Independence Day the year before. So I was like, I'm not doing another alien movie. I don't want to be the alien movie guy. So I turned down Men in Black. And Steven Spielberg called me. He was producing. He said, why are you turning down the movie? I was like, I just don't want to be the alien guy. He said, do me a favor. Don't use your brain for this one. Use my brain. He was so serious that I was like, all right, he did do Jaws.
I don't judge people in Hollywood that do anything, because you just don't know, man. If Steven Spielberg says, hey, you're going to be in Jaws 12.
If you get a call from Steven Spielberg and he says you're in Jaws 12, you're going to be chum.
Of course, I wasn't there in that situation, but it does seem to confirm this idea of owing those above you in Hollywood for putting you there and at least adhering to the status quo within that nature.
You really fucking painted the big picture here today,
Dude,
sir. We all think that, obviously.
This business is the beast.
Yeah.
And it eats everybody and shits them out. But here's what's funny about the beast. It's a never-ending line of people who want to get in the mouth and get chewed up and shit out.
Why is that?
It's because when you get in the belly, you get $2 million a week.
And I'm not saying that Will Smith being influenced in any way to do this sort of film is a bad thing. Because, hey, I wasn't there in that situation, and if someone offered me the role to do Men in Black, I probably wouldn't turn that down. Are you kidding me? It's a gigantic blockbuster science fiction film. What are you talking about? I'm there right now.
It's actually kind of
And secondly, I guess there's a lot of situations that we do in life that initially don't seem too appealing, but then later on, after we do go through with it, we realize that ultimately it was for the best. I mean, just think about job interviews, work presentations, going on dates with your cousins. Wait, what? All I'm saying is it does confirm this idea that there's a power of influence in Hollywood, and at least owing your career or some part of it to someone that's above you.
And owe. And The Godfather, luckily, what he owed was fix my son up. He got shot. And you go, ooh. But when you hear a knock on your door and he goes, I need you to do me a favor. You're gonna be at the dinner with the president, aren't you? Yeah. Or you're gonna be at a dinner with somebody I want dead.
Right.
I want you to put this pill in his drink.
Oof.
I don't.
Well, see.
Well, what you owe is we're gonna kill your whole family. I told you. I want my favor.
To give a final example, Patrice O'Neal also talks about Zach Galifianakis and his role in influencing the people behind the Hangover 2 movie to effectively remove Mel Gibson's involvement in potentially being a tattoo artist for the movie.
Be on Hangover 2 when Mike, the movie was about trannies, fucking people in the ass, drugs, death, and Mike Tyson who got a rape conviction. And you motherfuckers decide to gang up on Mel Gibson.
Say you can't be in this.
He can't play a tattoo artist in The Hangover 2?
That's pretty amazing.
Come on, man. It's not hypocrisy, because that means that's a human thing. It's something else.
It's cartel.
It's somebody owing somebody the favor.
Flash forward to 4 years later, and we get this interview with Zach Galifianakis, who appears to have this certain disdain for the culture that's in Hollywood.
What do you think is the biggest misconception of movie stars today? People have these ideas.
I think the faith that people put in Hollywood and all that, I think it's all bullshit. I think it's just gross. I mean, Hollywood's a weird town anyway. It brags about itself constantly. All it does is talk about how much money it makes. And it's a weird, I don't know, I don't agree with it. It's just the morals of Hollywood to me I don't get it. I like to be in it and act in it, but the way it acts as a unit, you read those trade magazines, it's just like gross.
Maybe Zach Galifianakis has seen the two faces of Hollywood and has realized, as Patrice O'Neal would put it, that Hollywood is this beast.
You think fucking Zach Galifianakis on his own said fuck Mel Gibson? He got permission. That's this business.
Jesus Christ.
That's this business.
So where does this leave Jim Jefferies and his future? Well, the way I see it going forward, he has one of two options. Number one, he continues full steam ahead and acts like nothing has ever happened. Realistically, this is probably the most likely outcome that's going to happen, because putting things into perspective, this is really just a small scandal for the way that Jim Jefferies sees his career, but also importantly, Comedy Central. I mean, is this really the first time a comedian has had to deal with some form of backlash from what he's said or done? And while that doesn't necessarily mean they're right for what they've done, it's testament to the fact that in the grand scheme of things, this is really just a small blimp on the horizon, and that Comedy Central are more than prepared to weather out this storm. This also makes a lot more sense when you realize that Comedy Central are essentially the only ones that are keeping Jim Jefferies on his show. So why would Jim Jefferies turn his back on the only people that are on his side in order to make up for the viewers that he's already lost? It's like cutting off the only other hand that has fed you. You've already lost one. Do you really want to lose another? And even though to any journalist or comedian or person, it might seem unethical to edit interviews later on to take words out of context, Jim Jefferies also probably realizes that that's kind of the norm in terms of looking at it from a showbiz perspective, because everyone from 60 Minutes to your local breakfast show to even your nightly news does it.
Here we go from a close-up to a wide shot, and that's where something's been cut. When we go back to the close-up, that's another edit. This one is so obvious it can even be heard in the audio alone.
Or for us to be kidnapped and renditioned back to the United States to be executed.
One reason for that is that an audio recording isn't consistent throughout an interview. The tone of an interviewee's voice will change, and even the quality of the recording will change as he shifts his head slightly in relation to the microphone.
Again, I'm not saying that it's right to do that, but it does seem much easier to fit within the status quo. And if that's the way that things have been done, then why would Jim Jefferies continue doing otherwise? Or number two, apologize and admit his deception on the show and potentially keep going with it, or just step down altogether. Truthfully, this is probably the most honourable way that Jim Jefferies could go down, and it's one of the pathways that I hope he does, because I gather that the anger from the community is just as much as about trying to bring him down, as it is also about equally trying to get him to acknowledge his mistakes, which is fair if you're a fan of Jim Jefferies or are just an ethical person. But at the same time, if Jim Jefferies did admit his mistakes live on air to those viewers on Comedy Central, there's a possibility that he's risking coming out to people who aren't aware of what he did, and in the process are losing those people that are the only ones left who are a fan of his show. Again, it kind of goes back to that previous point that I said, and that it might be easier to hanging on to what you've got left, rather than risking everything to try and get back those people that you've already lost, and in the whole process, lose everything altogether. Or he just apologizes and everyone loves him for it, and we all move on. Who knows? These are just two theories. Ultimately, I still think you can't deny everything that Jim Jefferies has done, because he's probably the most famous Australian stand-up aside from Adam Hills or Will Anderson. And it kind of reminds me of Bill Burr talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger and how people try to bring down his career just because he made one mistake by sleeping with his maid.
All my heroes are going down. Arnold Schwarzenegger, another great man. Another great man. Taken down by that gold-digging whore of a maid he's got. And I'm not saying he's not a piece of shit for doing what he did. It was a piece of shit move. But how come only he got chastised? What about the maid? Why was she called the maid that entire story? She was never called a whore, ever. Just boggled my mind. She knew his wife, first name basis, played with their kids, fucked her husband in their own goddamn bed. That's right down the checklist. First ballot Hall of Fame whore. Right there. Never. Why do you think she hooked up with him? Because of that 1987 flat top he's still rocking? The giant space between his teeth I could put this mic cord through? Or do you think maybe it's all that kindergarten cop money laying around the goddamn bedroom?
So even though I'm not saying that Jim Jefferies is up there with Arnold Schwarzenegger, not to mention that I'm not really a fan of his stand-up, I gotta give Jim Jefferies some credit for at least how he's taken himself from Perth to Melbourne and then to the UK and eventually finally settling down in the US to have his very own show. I mean, goddamn, how do you not appreciate such a career trajectory? So even though he may have completely changed his tune in the process of selling his soul to the Comedy Central devil, the biggest takeaway I get from all of this is not to focus too hard on Jim Jefferies himself, but rather take a step back and take a look around at the beast that he is in right now. Because just like Patrice O'Neal says, at the end of the day, Jim Jefferies is just doing what he's supposed to do.
My risk is opening my fucking mouth. It's risky. It's a risky thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid of nothing. I just don't want to be at a party and somebody goes, Patrice, here, try this. What is it? It'll make you feel better. I don't drink shit that makes me feel better, motherfucker. All right. Listen, the party's over for you.
Oh, shit.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.